Well, it's no news to say that we are living in a time of changes, big changes, indeed not just changes, but a change of era, as Pope Francis so often used to say. And for his part, Pope Leo, who has written a wonderful encyclical letter on artificial intelligence, invites us to look to Mary, the Mother of Christ, to guide our steps through this time of change. Mary knows all about change. The world's history changed completely the day she said yes to the angel at the Annunciation. She was to become the mother of Jesus, the mother of God. She was to be the one through whom the greatest revolution in history would take place. She brought Jesus into the world with his kingdom of peace and love, truth and justice. This year's pilgrimage to Lourdes invites us to focus on the angel's words to Mary, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you," and Mary's reply, "Yes, let your word be done unto me," as the message which she received as she was about to become the mother of Jesus. In our own little way, each of us repeats Mary's yes in this changing era that we are experiencing with all its triumphs and failures, light and darkness. And that yes to God that we say in imitation of Mary is something that must become concrete, as it was for Mary. The Word became flesh, and as it was for Saint Bernadette here in Lourdes. We know that Our Lady invited Bernadette, these are her words, "Would you do me the honour of coming here for 15 days? Bernadette said yes, and that became a solid commitment. Despite pressures and ridicule from people, Bernadette returned to the grotto day after day. She even did the illogical things that was asked of her by Our Lady, such as digging in the earth and drinking the muddy water that becomes the springs that we can now go to in the baths, etc. So for our pilgrimage, I'd like to propose to myself and to you that we can imitate Mary in saying yes to God and live it out in a concrete way, in three ways that Lourdes itself reminds us of. And the first way, with the same faith that Mary embodied, we can become weavers of hope for the people around us. It's an expression from Pope Leo. Mary is, after all, the woman who believed all things, endured all things, hoped all things. And wherever Mary is, there's hope. Likewise for us, we can keep hope alive for one another. There's so much talk today about influencers, but the truth is that each of us can be an influence for the good. We don't have to have thousands of followers on our social media like Greta Thunberg or maybe some other major figure. We can influence each other simply through the hope we weave into our relationships. And that's what's so wonderful about the young people who are here in Lourdes. They weave hope for us in their liveliness and vitality and their care that we see here in Lourdes. The fact is, everyone experiences ups and downs. All of us face limits and illness, the loss of somebody dear to us, the end of a relationship, moments of weakness or failure, disappointment and plans that didn't work out the way we thought, burdens that we feel are too heavy to carry. It's at those moments we can become a strength for one another, helping each other notice that light is still shining. It's often, mysteriously of course, in those very moments of darkness that we discover a deeper relationship with God, a richer compassion for others, and a more tender empathy for them. And by standing with one another in those moments, we really become weavers of hope. We weave hope for one another. It's what we see in Lourdes in thousands of ways, in the care given, the stories shared, the good fun created, the listening ear offered. A second way to imitate Mary flows naturally just from what I've just been saying about being weavers of hope. We weave hope by spreading love. Saint Bernadette used to say, love is enough. Pope Leo remarks in his letter, we're all called to be builders of a civilization of love. So we see here in many ways in Lourdes. In a book some years ago by the American writer Erich Fromm called The Art of Loving, he observed that although we deeply crave love, we often treat everything else as more important. Success, prestige, money, power, and we pour our energy into achieving these goals and almost none into learning the art of loving. Of course, doing well in life matters. We must aim high, we must do well. But what really matters above all is the Gospel's art of loving, what Jesus teaches us. And this is urgently needed today. As Pope Leo put it, we must learn to disarm our hearts of hatred and disarm our language of violence and aggression. Our world needs an antidote to the hostility and venom so often exhibited. Living the gospel art of loving, is precisely such an antidote. Again, as I say, it's what we witness here in Lourdes, in the many ways that in this, what I would call, city of mutual love, love for one another, we realise it's love, ultimately, that brings meaning, joy, hope, and peace into our world. Nothing is small if it's done out of love. And that's it. Love starts with the smallest of gestures. Last week, somebody told me, a priest who's in America, told me a little story that really struck me. When he was a young priest, he was in a parish by the seaside, and at the back of the parish house there was the seaside, and the garden wall overlooking onto the sea. And one evening, when he was at the garden, he glanced over the wall to look onto the sea, and there was a woman sitting alone, staring out at the water. He simply greeted her with, "Good evening." She greeted back, but that was it, said nothing more. But the next day she called round to the house to say that that small gesture had saved her life. She had been contemplating ending it. That brief moment of kindness opened a path to healing. She stayed in touch with that priest. Later she would meet her future husband. They married, had a beautiful family, and that young priest, now older, has had the joy of baptizing the children over those years. The third point, last point, again, it's one Pope Leo emphasises in his letter on artificial intelligence, that this point is essential for anyone who seeks to be a weaver of hope and a builder of the civilization of love. And it's this: Mary teaches us to direct our gaze, the way we're looking, towards those points at which humanity is broken and the world becomes distorted. Yes, look, we look around us, we can see every day, every age has those people who are very powerful, they have loads of influence, they have loads of authority, they make big news. But the Gospel invites us to be like Mary and look from a different vantage point, from below. Lourdes teaches us to do that, to look at things from the point of view of the vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled, the suffering. Pope Leo says, and I quote, that we're called to look at the world from a lower position, through the eyes of those who suffer rather than the mighty, to view history through the eyes of the little ones rather than the perspective of the powerful, to interpret the events of history from the viewpoint of the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the wounded child, the exile, the fugitive. This Marian way of seeing, of looking, it's not sentimentality, it's transformative. It calls us to respect human dignity, respond to injustice, allow compassion to guide our choices. So I conclude. Seeing the world through the eyes of the wounded, as Mary did, allows us in this era of change to nurture hope instead of despair, and to help build a civilization of love instead of aggression and violence. In this vision, it is a fundamental truth that every person, the unborn, the migrants, those approaching death, every person is to be recognized as the presence of Jesus, someone to be supported, protected, and accompanied. So saying yes to God like Mary did to the angel, who was God's messenger, becomes for us yes to Jesus in each person we meet. The Jesus perhaps who is yet to be born, the Jesus who has to be helped to grow, the Jesus who has to be helped to develop, the Jesus who has to be accompanied at life's end. Always Jesus. Let our pilgrimage be a time to practice even more Mary's yes in our lives.